information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And good morning. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, March 2nd. And your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pijacki. And we begin with a look at the weather, and it's a pretty good-looking change in the weather for once in a while. Today it'll be not as cold with some clouds, and then it'll be sunny all day, high of about 34 degrees. Tonight it'll be clear to partly cloudy with a low of 26. Then there will be a little snow, sleet, and rain late tomorrow morning that'll be followed by rain in the afternoon, and the high will be 40. Wednesday will be mostly cloudy, but the high will be 47. And then on Thursday, there will be periods of rain and a high of 49. And looking ahead to the weekend, Friday looks like some showers, but a high of 54. And I hope you're sitting down for this. Saturday, a high of 60 degrees is predicted. Whew.
Break out the shorts.
Really? Well, we've been waiting for this one. The normal high and low for today is 37 and 22. The record high was 64 degrees back in 1954, and the record low was a -2 in 1980. Last year, our high was 43 and our low was 15 degrees. And yesterday, the national high was in Borrego Springs, California of 95 degrees, and the low was in International Falls, where I think they mean the temperature falls, because it was -26 there yesterday. So I'd rather go to California than Minnesota, I think. All right, over to you, Ed.
All right, thank you, Ted. And looking at the front page of today's Buffalo News, our first story is Iran promises revenge as U.S. reports 4 killed. Iran vowed revenge Sunday after the killing of its supreme leader and traded strikes with Israel as part of a widening war prompted by a surprise U.S. and Israeli bombardment. The U.S. military said 4 service members have been killed, the first known American casualties from the conflict. Blasts in Tehran sent a huge plume of smoke into the sky in an area of government buildings. Iranian authorities say more than 200 people have been killed since the start of the strikes that killed the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and other senior leaders. Iran fired missiles at Israel and Gulf Arab states in retaliation, while Israel pledged non-stop strikes against Iran's leaders and military. In Israel, loud explosions caused by missile impacts or interceptions could be heard in Tel Aviv. Israel's rescue services said 9 people were killed and 28 wounded in a strike that hit a synagogue in the central town of Beit Shemesh, bringing the overall death toll in the country to 11. 11 people were still missing after the strike, police said, as rescue crews combed the rubble. The U.S. military, meanwhile, said B-2 stealth bombers have struck Iran's ballistic missile facilities with 2,000-pound bombs. President Trump said on social media that 9 Iranian warships had been, quote, destroyed and sunk, and that the Iranian Navy's headquarters had been, quote again, largely destroyed. The strikes and counterattacks underscored how the killing of Khamenei and Trump's calls for the overthrow of the decades-old Islamic Republic carry the potential for a prolonged conflict that could envelop the Middle East. In Tehran, there was little sign that Iranians had heeded Trump's call for an uprising against the government. The streets were largely deserted as people sheltered during heavy airstrikes, witnesses told the Associated Press, speaking anonymously for fear of retribution. The paramilitary Basij, which has played a central role in crushing protests, has set up checkpoints across the city, they said. In southern Iran, at least 165 people were killed when a girls' school was struck and dozens more were wounded, the state-run IRNA news agency reported. The Israeli military said it was not aware of strikes in the area. The U.S. military said it was looking into the reports. The U.S. military said 4 service members were killed and 4 others seriously wounded without providing further details. It said several others suffered minor injuries and concussions. In the 12-day war last June, Israeli and American strikes greatly weakened Iran's air defenses, military leadership, and nuclear program. But the killing of Khamenei, who had ruled Iran for more than 3 decades, creates a leadership vacuum, increasing the risk of regional instability. The CIA had been tracking the movements of senior Iranian leaders, including Khamenei, for months, according to a person familiar with the operation, who was not authorized to comment publicly and spoke on condition of anonymity. The intelligence was shared with Israeli officials, and the timing of the strikes was adjusted in part because of that information, the person said. The New York Times earlier reported about the CIA's efforts ahead of the U.S.-Israeli strikes. Iranian President Mahmoud Pezeshkian said in a pre-recorded message that a new leadership council had begun its work. The country's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, said a new supreme leader would be chosen in 1 or 2 days. Trump told The Atlantic in an interview on Sunday that he planned to speak with Iran's new leadership. They want to talk, and I have agreed to talk, so I will be talking to them, he said, declining comment on the timing. As word spread of Khamenei's death, some in Tehran could be seen cheering from rooftops, witnesses said. Others mourned as a black flag was raised over the Imam Reza shrine in Mashhad. You have crossed our red line and must pay the price, Iran's parliamentary speaker Mohammad Bagher Kobaf said in a televised address. We will deliver such devastating blows that you yourself will be driven to beg. Trump warned against retaliation. In a social media post, typed in all capital letters, Trump said, "They better not do that. If they do, we will hit them with a force that has never been seen before." As supreme leader, Khamenei had final say on all major policies since 1989. He led Iran's clerical establishment and the Revolutionary Guard, the 2 main centers of power in the governing theocracy. An Iranian medical professional in northern Iran said he and colleagues spent the early hours of Sunday celebrating Khamenei's death indoors because armed security forces were still heavily deployed in the city. There were forces stopping and interrogating people celebrating in their cars, but there was no gunfire, said the doctor, who spoke on condition of anonymity for fear of reprisal.
Also on today's front page, Trump's campaign cry gives way to conflict. President Trump, whose fierce denunciation of military adventurism abroad fueled his unlikely rise to the top of the Republican Party, risked becoming ensnared by that very type of conflict. The U.S. and Israeli attack on Iran Saturday cemented Trump's decade-long transformation from a candidate who in 2016 called the Iraq War a big fat mistake to a president warning Americans to prepare for potential casualties overseas and encouraging Iranians to seize control of your destiny. The strikes were also at odds with Trump's warnings during the 2024 campaign that his Democratic rival, Kamala Harris, was surrounded by war hawks eager to send troops overseas. Trump justified the action as necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons or developing missiles capable of reaching the U.S., less than a year after he said airstrikes obliterated their capability. U.S. intelligence has also said Iran's weapons credibility was substantially degraded. For Trump, memories of the false pretenses underlying the Iraq War could lead to pressure to prove his assertion that Iran's weapons production posed an imminent threat to Americans. And for Republicans, already facing a challenging election year weighed down by economic anxiety, the shift could force a reassessment of how the attacks fit into the America First isolationist-leaning movement that the party has embraced during the Trump era. While Trump might benefit from an early rally around the flag effect, that could be hard to sustain for weeks and months, if not longer, a far different scenario from the swift effort to remove Nicolas Maduro from power earlier this year in Venezuela. Success on one day is one thing. The days after are inherently unpredictable. The question is whether Iran's goal is simply to outlast America and whether Trump has strategic attention deficit disorder, which will allow the Iranians to rise from the ashes and claim victory, said Michael Rubin, a historian at the American Enterprise Institute, who worked as a staff advisor on Iran and Iraq at the Pentagon from 2002 to 2004. Many Republicans were quick to line up behind the president, including Texas Senator John Cornyn and State Attorney General Ken Paxton, who are fighting a competitive Senate primary election tomorrow morning. This always entails risk, Cornyn said on Saturday at a campaign stop near Houston. But we know that Iran will not stop unless the United States and our allies stop them. Others, like Senator Todd Young of Indiana, praised the military and were critical of Iran while noting that Americans will have questions that must be answered. There was outright opposition from some who have long criticized overseas entanglements, including Senator Rand Paul, who lamented the start of another preemptive war. Former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and Georgia Republican, who was once a very close Trump ally, rejected the president's warning of Iran's nuclear capabilities. She wrote online, "It's always a lie, and it's always America last. But it feels like the worst betrayal this time because it comes from the very man and the administration who we all believed was different." The administration did little to advance to prepare Americans for such a dramatic action. Vice President Vance told the Washington Post this past week there was no chance the U.S. would become involved in a drawn-out war as it did in Iraq. During his State of the Union speech on Tuesday, Trump dedicated just a few lines to Iran, arguing the country and its proxies have spread nothing but terrorism, death, and hate. That stands in stark contrast to the lengthy run-up to the Iraq War. President George W. Bush, for example, named Iraq as a member of the so-called Axis of Evil in January of 2002. Then Secretary of State Colin Powell delivered a now infamous speech to the United Nations in February 2003, making the case for war based on the inaccurate assertion that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. The invasion, which ultimately dominated Bush's second term, didn't begin until March of 2003. We just have to be honest that there is a sense that this was not sold to the American public sufficiently, Andrew Colvett said on Saturday on The Charlie Kirk Show, an online program founded by the late conservative activist who was close to Trump. Perhaps there will be an opportunity at the back end of this, he said. Colvett was willing, however, to give Trump leeway, noting these are the types of challenging decisions that presidents are entrusted with. President Trump has earned a big, long leash, he said, not an unlimited one, but a very long one to make tough decisions. Polling suggests that many Americans shared Trump's concerns about Iran's nuclear capabilities, even if they're less confident in the president's response. About half of U.S. adults were extremely or very concerned that Iran's nuclear program poses a direct threat to the U.S., according to a poll this month from the Associated Press Norrick Center for Public Affairs Research. Most Americans, 61%, said Iran is an enemy of the U.S., which is up slightly from the Pearson Institute poll conducted in September 2023. But their confidence in the president's judgment when it comes to relationships with adversaries and the use of military force abroad is low, the new poll shows, with only about 3 in 10 Americans saying they have a great deal or quite a bit of trust in Trump.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 15 minutes past the hour. And we'll turn now to the editorial page of the Buffalo News. And today's editorial is headlined, "A Place to Live, State and Local Lawmakers Tackle the Affordable Housing Crisis with Innovative Initiatives." Whether or not it's acknowledged by the Trump administration, there is an affordability crisis in America. Its stark realities can be seen at grocery stores and in monthly rent payments. Lacking any clear federal government initiative toward alleviating the financial pain Americans are suffering, states and localities have wisely taken on the challenge. Here in New York State, affordable housing has a chance to succeed. The latest effort involves smart legislation to allow property owners who substantially rehabilitate half the space in vacant office buildings into homes to reap tax benefits. The bill is proposed by Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes. The bill has direct benefits to this area because, as reported by News Albany Bureau Chief Robert Gavin, if enacted into law, it would apply outside of New York City, in cities, towns, and villages, to buildings that are at least half vacant and have at least 25,000 gross square feet. Property owners who revitalize these buildings would be required to convert at least 50% of the vacant space into residential units. After doing so, they would receive a refundable tax credit equal to 10% of their qualified rehabilitation expenditures. In addition to Peoples-Stokes, the bill is co-sponsored by Senator Patricia Fahey, a Democrat of Albany. Peoples-Stokes' statement about the cost of housing becoming unaffordable for, quote, far too many people in Buffalo and in so many other communities across the state, close quote, is absolutely on target. The need for affordable housing can be seen on the streets, where some people find themselves after not being able to make the rent. As reported in the news, Deidre Williams' recent piece on the problem, there are many reasons people end up homeless, but housing affordability, along with evictions, is a major cause. One way to ensure that as many new residential units are coming into the market as possible, as the Assemblywoman said, is to get creative and look at the significant number of unused office spaces throughout the state. It's the equivalent of taking lemons and making lemonade for those who cannot afford the rent or mortgage from Buffalo to Brooklyn. It's simple. When housing stock is increased, the cost of housing drops. If the bill passed through both the Assembly and the Senate houses, it should be met with approval by Governor Kathy Hochul, who has made affordable housing a central focus. One of the governor's housing proposals, titled Let Them Build, is supported by Amherst Town Supervisor Sean Lavin in Another Voice essay for the News. As he describes it, it would modernize the State Environmental Quality Review Act, a process that has remained largely unchanged since 1976. Lavin writes, the governor's Let Them Build agenda seeks to update requirements to reduce unnecessary bureaucracy and delays that extend timelines and drive up costs that ultimately fall on renters, homeowners, and taxpayers. In addition, Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan, in his previous role as state senator, was also able to get his colleagues to approve $80 million to test his concept of creating hundreds of new starter homes and rehabbing thousands of affordable apartments across upstate New York. Whether it's legislation to create state tax credits for office residential building conversions, modernizing the State Environmental Quality Review Act, or the rehabilitation of affordable apartments, local and state leaders are moving forward to close the gap on affordable housing.
Our next article comes from the Another Voice column, and today's issue is about public safety, and it's submitted by John D'Alessandro, who is the Secretary of the Firefighters Association of the state of New York. And the headline is, Volunteer Firefighters Need a Plan That Works. Across Western New York, affordability is a lived reality. Families in Buffalo and throughout Erie and Niagara counties are navigating rising housing costs, higher grocery bills, and increased child care expenses while trying to remain rooted in the communities they call home. Governor Hochul's fiscal year 2027 executive budget appropriately placed affordability at the center of state policy. When household finances are stretched thin, the ripple effects reach every corner of community life, including public safety. Nowhere is that connection more evident than in Western New York's volunteer fire service. Volunteer firefighters protect more than 90% of New York State geographically. In towns and villages across the region, they are working parents, full-time employees, and neighbors who respond when alarms sound, often in the middle of the night, without pay and with little recognition. Yet the demands placed on volunteers continue to increase. Training requirements, time commitments, and out-of-the-pocket expenses make service harder to sustain for working families. Recruitment and retention challenges are no longer hypothetical. Fortunately, New York already has a clear and practical path forward. In 2022, the state convened a task force to examine these challenges and recommend solutions. Those recommendations form the foundation of the Firefighters Association of the State of New York's 14-point plan, also known as Volunteer Optimization Legislative Initiative. The plan advances common sense reforms, such as expanding the volunteer firefighter income tax credit, streamlining training requirements, and minimizing the personal expenses that volunteers routinely shoulder. These are targeted, fiscally responsible measures that reflect how volunteer departments actually operate. As Albany moves through the 2026 budget process, lawmakers have an opportunity to advance solutions that already enjoy broad consensus, including strengthening the volunteer firefighter tax credit. Affordability and public safety are deeply intertwined. When volunteer service is sustainable, communities remain protected. The plan offers a responsible way forward, and Western New York's volunteers deserve nothing less.
Well, now we're going to turn to today's editorial cartoon, and it comes from Mike Lukovich, who draws for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and I'll say he is no fan of President Trump. And today's cartoon is a single-panel cartoon with the president at a podium speaking, and he has his left hand on the podium and his right hand raised with a finger pointing up, and he has kind of an angry look on his face, and the balloon says, "So far this term, my family and I have made billions off the presidency. Affordability issue solved." And to note that as you look at the drawing of the president here, he has a little lapel pin with a white, blue, and red. And while you might think of that as being the colors of our flag, it actually represents the flag of Russia. And so that is today's editorial cartoon. You can decide what it means to you.
And we turn now to the national opinion section, and our first opinion piece comes to us from Jackie Calmes of the Los Angeles Times. And the headline is, "Trump's address also trumpets just how much he plays Congress." For this year's State of the Union address, as usual, the president was the center of attention. That's just where Donald Trump lives. So it's no wonder that he broke his record for the length of the nationally televised speech. He was the star of his own unreality show, with an audience of tens of millions. In front of him, idolatrous Republican lawmakers popped up and down to applaud like clowns in wind-up music boxes of old. In fact, a president comes to the Capitol as a guest of Congress's home. He's there only by invitation of the Speaker of the House. It's a historical nod to the separation of powers so essential to America's system of government. But, of course, Trump acts as though he owns the place, and why not? GOP majorities in the House and Senate essentially gave him the keys and the title, along with much of their constitutional power over spending, federal appointments, war powers, and more. What a difference a president makes, a triumphalist Trump imperiously marveled about himself on Tuesday night, after exaggerating or falsely claiming his achievements over this past year. Got that? Even with a Congress controlled by his party, with its majorities at risk in the midterm election year because of his unpopularity, Trump couldn't find it within his narcissistic self to share the spacious credit. Then again, he does not act alone most of the time, and polls show he's getting blame, not credit, from 6 out of 10 Americans. For the good of the nation, Congress must take back its powers from Trump, and with them, more of America's attention. No less than Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, a Trump appointee, pleaded as much just days before the State of the Union address. In concurring with the court's 6-3 ruling last month, striking down the centerpiece of Trump's agenda, the unilateral tariffs, as a usurpation of Congress' constitutional taxing power, Gorsuch all but implored lawmakers to restore Congress's intended role as co-equal branch of government, and the president to respect it as such. Spoiler alert, he won't. Gorsuch's opinion was a master class in why the founders created Congress in the very first article of the Constitution, saving the presidency and judiciary for the second and third articles. I don't agree with Gorsuch on much, but his concurrence should be required reading for Trump and the members of Congress who plainly need remedial civics lessons. It's worth noting at length, the italics are mine. Our founders understood that men are not angels, and we disregard that insight at our peril when we allow a few, or the one, to aggrandize their power based on loose or uncertain authority, Gorsuch wrote. Yes, legislating can be hard and take time, he closed. And yes, it can be tempting to bypass Congress when some pressing problem arises. But the deliberative nature of the legislative process was the whole point of its design. Through that process, the nation can tap the combined wisdom of the people's elected representatives, not just that of the one faction or man. There, deliberation tempers impulse, and compromise hammers disagreements into workable solutions. And because laws must earn such broad support to survive the legislative process, they tend to endure in allowing ordinary people to plan their lives in ways they cannot when the rules shift from day to day. In all, the legislative process helps ensnare each of us that has a stake in the laws that govern us and the nation's future. Do you know what won't endure? Trump's policymaking by impulse and fiat, by hundreds of executive orders. It would be in his interest to work with Congress on laws that will outlive him and stand at his legacy. Yet, he wants to be a king, quickly getting results on a whim by the thumb of a tweet or a Sharpie signature on paper. Legislating requires time, compromise, and ultimately sharing credit. Perhaps that's why Trump is so intent on erecting edifices of tangible marble and gold in Washington and beyond. Those will endure when his policies don't. And that's the legacy he craves. Ballrooms, arches, statues, busts, and buildings in his name and image. Gorsuch wasn't in the House chamber to hear Trump's address and his slap at the court's tariff decision. Just 4 of the 9 justices were, including Chief Justice John Roberts, who wrote the main opinion, and 2 other justices who joined in opposing Trump's tariff power grab. The president insisted he'd proceed with unilateral tariffs under separate laws, adding that congressional action will not be necessary. Republican lawmakers applauded. The founders in the Constitution required presidents to annually report on the State of the Union and to recommend to Congress such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. Then, it's the president's job to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Yet, as usual, Trump outlined little in the way of a legislative agenda. The president likes to note, as he did in his address, that he'll preside over this year's celebrations of the nation's 250th birthday. But he should know that the nation wasn't born in a day on July 4th, 1776. The founders squabbled 11 years more over the Constitution, and states took another 2 years to ratify it. Yes, democracy has been hard from the very start. That's why Trump's appeal for some Americans is his action figure persona. Forget norms, laws, and the Constitution. But perhaps, if Trump's poll numbers remain in the tank, even Republicans in Congress will summon the guts to protect the institution's powers. And if they don't, that's all the more reason for voters to turn the keys over to the Democrats when it comes up in November.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 32 minutes past the hour. And our second column comes from Salim Firth, who writes for the Tribune News Service, and his headline is, "Can Young Americans Succeed in Reinventing the Starter Home?" Will 2026 be remembered as the year of the starter home? Since January, bills have been introduced in Florida, Connecticut, Maryland, and at least 9 other state legislatures to allow smaller houses on smaller lots. And in Massachusetts, voters will decide by referendum whether to override town zoning rules and allow small lot houses across the state. 10 years ago, young professionals were shocked that they couldn't afford apartments near their well-paid jobs. They launched the Yes in My Backyard movement in an effort to change how people feel about development in their backyards from no to yes. By 2026, many of them have children and are ready to own a piece of the American dream. Spoiler: the homeownership market is even further out of reach than urban rentals. It may be hard for young Americans to imagine, but developers in the mid-20th century did brisk business selling houses the size of 2-bedroom apartments. Today, builders face a restrictive regulatory environment and high land costs, and starter homes are one casualty. To recoup their investments, builders now build fewer, larger homes aimed at the upper third of the market. The anemic supply of new homes keeps the prices of existing homes high, too. The priced-out generation is pushing for regulatory changes that would allow builders to make money selling starter homes. One of those young professionals is Andrew McCullough, a researcher in Greater Boston. As McCullough watched elected leaders painstakingly advance a modest bill to allow some apartments near transit, he decided to try something radical, placing a question on the state's 2026 ballot. Pakula took aim at the single most prevalent and least justifiable regulation in American zoning codes, the minimum lot size. A minimum lot size determines how much land is legally required for a house lot, and it can vary from several hundred square feet to tens of thousands of square feet. Pakula's approach has outsized importance because it will be the first time voters are on record about a statewide zoning rule. But the substance of the proposal is not different from what another young New Englander, Maine House Speaker Ryan Fecteau, successfully passed in 2025. No town there can require more than a professional basketball court's worth of land for a house connected with local utilities. Ali Thurman Quinlan, a civic-minded Arkansas architect, told me that lot size was the key to affordability in a new neighborhood she's helping to lay out on the site of a defunct hospital in Bloomington, Indiana. Quinlan expects new homes to cost about $270,000 on micro lots, down from $425,000 if she had followed the existing zoning. To be sure, the odds are never great for any individual effort, whether it's a home building startup or a bill, but from the ballot to the State House and from incremental redevelopment to industrialized housing, a new generation is fighting its way into home ownership.
And returning back to the front page, we have this article. UB's plan to eliminate fossil fuels on campus could take decades. The university at Buffalo uses vast amounts of energy to power the 130 buildings on its North Campus in Amherst. And those energy needs will only rise as new buildings are constructed, including the one that will house supercomputers to aid with complex research. Now, the university has a plan to build for the future while winding down its dependence on fossil fuels. The Clean Energy Master Plan could cost more than $1 billion and will likely take about 25 years to implement. UB partnered with Wendell Companies, an architecture, engineering, energy efficiency, and construction management firm, to craft this plan. While the initial price tag may cause sticker shock to some, officials say the benefits abound, from attracting new students and faculty to a high-tech campus of the future, to increasing energy efficiency and reducing the university's impact on global climate change. This is not only the right thing to do, but it's the necessary thing to do, said Ryan McPherson, UB's Chief Sustainability Officer. The plan got a $62 million boost in funding in September from New York's Sustainable Future Program. Decarbonization efforts at the South Campus received $6 million from the same program, also announced by the governor's office in September. The North Campus Clean Energy Master Plan addresses how the university plans to reduce energy use and build a cleaner, more efficient heating and cooling system. It's no small task. The campus comprises 130 buildings with an annual energy cost of more than $16.6 million, according to the university. Right now, about 35% of the energy used on the campus comes from natural gas, accounting for about 14,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions annually, according to the university. UB's goal is to get those emissions down to net zero by 2030. The Clean Energy Master Plan notes, however, that net zero emissions by 2030 probably won't happen. It's more likely that the campus could be zero emission by 2039 or 2045, depending on how the plan is implemented. One key pillar of the plan is increasing energy efficiency. UB and Wendell found that about 300 projects on the North Campus could decrease total energy use by 30%. The price tag of just those efficiency upgrades, which include improving airflow in labs, modernizing and optimizing HVAC controls, and fine-tuning lighting controls, is an estimated $530 million of the overall cost of the plan. The good news is that of the 530 million, about 400 million is what we would consider deference maintenance, things that we have to do anyway, McPherson said.
Well, staying on the front page of today's Buffalo News, our next story is headlined, Buffalo Police asked the Sheriff's Office for help with its Granville investigation. The answer was no. With Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan pledging a new era of police transparency, some stark contrast between the way Buffalo Police Department and the Erie County Sheriff's Office reacted to the investigation of Sheriff's Narcotic Chief Daniel D.J. Granville have emerged. Ryan released thousands of pages of documents and transcripts, as well as images, video, and audio related to the internal investigation into the Buffalo Police Department's handling of the Granville case this past week after a year of delays under former Buffalo Mayor Chris Scanlon. The case was not closed or discipline issued until Scanlon's final days in office in December. The Sheriff's Office in January released its own documents related to its internal investigation in the Granville case. It was 7 pages long. Only 4 of those pages involved, quote, a report of investigation, close quote, summary that found Granville had violated 2 policies. Similar to the Buffalo Police Department's actions prior to Ryan becoming mayor, the Sheriff's Office rebuffed records requests regarding the Granville case from the Erie County Legislature and the news media. But as revealed on Thursday, Sheriff John Garcia's leadership team also refused to assist a fellow law enforcement agency with its own internal investigation into the city police response to a 7-car accident scene caused by Granville. Ryan described the lack of cooperation as, quote, a big, stinky mess. None of it looks good, he said on Thursday. None of it makes the public think that if there was malfeasance or nefarious actions on any officers, they would actually get an honest look. Sheriff John Garcia did not respond to a request for comment, but has declined all calls from news media and held no news conference since the Granville case broke publicly in March of last year. In response to requests to speak with the sheriff, spokesman Chris Horvatis emailed statements. He said, it should be noted that the Buffalo Police Department Internal Affairs Division's responsibility was to investigate the conduct and actions of the responding Buffalo Police Department officers. The Erie County Sheriff's Office did not have any information regarding the conduct or action of the officers that responded to the scene, nor did we have any personnel at the scene other than Chief Granville.
In financial news, we have this headline. Trump expects FedPIC and artificial intelligence to replay 90s boom, but economists are wary. President Trump, his Treasury Secretary, and his choice to lead the Federal Reserve believe they can coax the U.S. economy into partying like it's 1999. They are putting their faith in artificial intelligence to duplicate when the Internet arrived in the 1990s. Back then, the American economy surged as businesses became more productive, unemployment tumbled, and inflation remained in check. Trump is confident that his Fed chair nominee, Kevin Warsh, can unleash an even greater economic bonanza by jettisoning what the president sees as the central bank's reluctance to slash interest rates. Many economists are skeptical. The story the Trump team is telling, that a visionary Fed chair, Alan Greenspan, fueled the 90s boom by keeping interest rates low, is incomplete at best. The administration is offering a rather distorted version of what actually happened in the 1990s, economist Dario Perkins of T.S. Lombard said in a commentary. Nonetheless, the Trump administration believes history can repeat itself. Trump has repeatedly attacked current Fed Chief Jerome Powell, whose term ends in May, for his reluctance to lower rates aggressively while inflation hovers above the central bank's 2% target. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on social media in January that the president sought to replace Powell with someone with an open, Greenspan-like mind. January 30th, Trump said he was picking Warsh. Warsh has argued that AI-driven improvements in productivity could justify lower interest rates. These views align with Trump's desires for the Fed rate cuts, but mark a break with Warsh's past as an inflation hawk. In the aftermath of the 2007 to 2009 Great Recession, Warsh, then a federal governor, objected to some of the central bank's efforts to keep the struggling economy by pushing down rates, even though unemployment exceeded 9%. Warsh warned them wrongly that inflation would soon accelerate. At issue now are gains in productivity and the possibility that AI will make them much bigger. To economists, productivity improvements are almost magical. When companies roll out new machines or technology, their workers can become more efficient and produce more stuff per hour. That allows firms to earn more and to raise employees' pay without raising prices. In short, surging productivity can drive economic growth without spurring inflation.
Well, our next story is headlined, Supreme Court Case Forges Some Odd Alliances. Gun rights and cannabis legalization are usually on opposite ends of the political spectrum, but both movements have brought about seismic shifts in the United States in recent decades. Now, those forces are lining up for a rare overlap in a case coming before the Supreme Court today, and it's not the only unusual alliance. The Republican Trump administration will be defending a firearm restriction with backing from gun control groups typically more aligned with Democrats. And on the other side is a pairing of the National Rifle Association and the American Civil Liberties Union. At stake is a federal law that bars people who regularly use marijuana from legally owning guns. It's an issue that has divided lower courts since a landmark 2022 Supreme Court decision expanded gun rights. Cecilia Wang, legal director at the ACLU, said the law violates the Second Amendment and is unconstitutionally vague about what it means to be a drug user. We're deeply concerned with the potential of this statute to basically give federal prosecutors a blank check, she said. Millions of Americans use marijuana, and there's no way for them to know, based on the words of this statute, whether they could be charged or convicted of this crime because they own a firearm. Cannabis is legal for medicinal use in most states and for recreational use in about half the country, but the law also applies more widely against all illegal substances, meaning the case could allow broader legal gun use by other drug users. The group Everytown for Gun Safety said the law meets the High Court's requirement that gun laws must have a strong grounding in the nation's history and tradition. Restricting firearm use by illegal drug users is as old as legislative recognition of the drug problem itself, attorneys wrote. Cannabis remains legal on the federal level, though President Trump has signed an order to fast-track its reclassification as a less dangerous drug. His Justice Department is also asking the justices to revive a criminal case against Ali Daniel Hermani, a Texas man charged with a felony because he had a gun in his house and acknowledged smoking marijuana every other day. FBI agents also found a small amount of cocaine when they searched his home, but the gun charge was the only one filed against him. The conservative-leaning Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans rejected the case, finding that only people who are intoxicated while armed can be charged with a crime.
As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. And we have 2 death notices today and no national obituaries. The first death listing is Green Lynn S., age 83, passed away peacefully on February 25th, 2026 in Buffalo, New York, after a brief illness. And our second one is Spink David Miller, He's from Orchard Park, but he was born in Attica, and he died on February 20th, 2026, at the age of 85. If you need any further information on these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. Again, 716-821-5555.
Well, now it's time to check in with Georgia Nichols Royal Stars. And if today is your birthday, happy birthday. You're a compassionate visionary who is intuitive and passionate about social issues. You crave security and unconditional love. This is a year of service for you, probably service to family. Now, the stars show what kind of a day you're going to have. 5 stars is a dynamic day. 4 stars are positive. 3 stars are average. 2 stars are so-so, and 1 star is a difficult day. Aries, you have a 3-star day. You might have to work for the benefit of someone else, perhaps provide a service for them or help them. You might also focus on health concerns or be more involved than usual with a pet. And the word for tonight is work. For us who are Taurians, we have a 4-star day today. Problems, however, often increase in intensity as the full moon approaches. Today, you might feel this before tomorrow's full moon. Be patient with kids and romantic partners, and tonight you should socialize. For Gemini, it's a 3-star day. You make a great impression on everyone this week. People will notice and admire you. They see you as attractive and capable, and in parentheses, even if you don't do anything different. Tonight the word is cocoon. For Cancer, it's a 4-star day. Today you're interested in exploring new ideas and travel, plus you're equally eager to talk to someone and share your views. Tonight, the word is lively conversations. For Leo, 3 stars. You have money on your mind today, and although you can be dramatic, flamboyant, and entertaining, you're cautious about practical matters. Tonight you should check your belongings. For Virgo, 4 stars. The moon is in your sign, which makes you more emotional than usual, especially before tomorrow when it is a full moon. Tonight, you win. For Libra, 3 stars. This can be a productive day for you because you have the energy and mental discipline to work and get things done. However, you might prefer to be low-key or work alone. Tonight, you should enjoy solitude. For Scorpio, 4 stars. This is a playful, fun-loving day. Accept invitations to socialize with others and enjoy sports events or fun activities with kids. Tonight, the word is warm friendships. For Sagittarius, 3 stars. It might be important to be aware that some people know personal details about your life today because you're in the limelight, and in parentheses, whether you know it or not. Tonight, you're admired. Capricorn, 4 stars. Because you have an urge for adventure today, do something to break free of your daily routine. Tonight, explore and learn. Aquarius, 3 stars. Money, cash flow, earnings, inheritance, taxes, and debt are your focus today. Because tomorrow is the full moon, be patient with others today if discrepancies or arguments arrive concerning finances. Tonight, check your finances. And finally, for Pisces, it's a 3-star day. Today, you're best served by going more than halfway when dealing with others, especially spouses, partners, and close friends. Tonight, cooperate.
And now we take a look at what has happened on this date in history. In 1807, the act prohibiting the importation of slaves was signed by President Thomas Jefferson. However, the domestic trade of enslaved people was not affected. In 1877, Republican Rutherford B. Hayes was declared the winner of the 1876 presidential election over Democrat Samuel J. Tilden, despite Tilden winning the popular vote. Tilden remains the only presidential candidate to get over 50% of the popular vote. He received 50.9% and not win the presidency. In 1943, the 3-day Battle of the Bismarck Sea began in the Southwest Pacific during World War II. U.S. and Australian warplanes inflicted heavy damage on the Imperial Japanese convoys. In 1955, 9 months before Rosa Parks' more famous act of defiance, Claudette Colvin, a black high school student in Montgomery, Alabama, was arrested after refusing to give up her seat on a public bus to a white passenger. In 1962, Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points for the Philadelphia Warriors against the New York Knicks, a single-game NBA record that still stands. Philadelphia won by a score of 169 to 147. And Ed, I don't think there was anyone in the crowd saying, defense, defense. Right. And finally, in 1985, the U.S. government approved screening tests for AIDS that detected antibodies to the virus, allowing possibly contaminated blood to be excluded from the blood supply.
Well, we'll check a few notes from our political notebook now. And in Texas, Senate hopefuls make their final pitches. A heated U.S. Senate race in Texas entered its final stretch on Sunday, with candidates on both sides of the aisle making final pitches to voters ahead of tomorrow's primary, the nation's first big contest of the 2026 midterm elections. Incumbent John Cornyn is trying to avoid being the first Republican senator from Texas to lose a primary, fighting challenges from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and U.S. Representative Wesley Hunt. Democrats, hungry to win a Senate race for the first time since 1988, see an opening but have their own knotty race to figure out. U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett, the rhetorical brawler and regular antagonist for President Trump, is stressing her federal experience and was scheduled to meet voters in the Dallas area. Crockett was endorsed Friday from former Vice President Kamala Harris. State Representative James Tellerico, a soft-spoken seminarian who emphasizes his crossover appeal to Republicans, was set to hold a rally in San Antonio as part of the final tour that he describes as a movement. Cornyn's precarious stature as an incumbent, vulnerable in his own party's primary, has been the focus of a majority of the massive sums spent by both sides in the run-up to Tuesday.
You are listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for March 2nd on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
Welcome back. We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Ted Pajacki.
And I'm Ed Howard, and we'll turn now to the city and regional section of the paper. And our first headline is, Pegula gives boost to stalled project at Heritage Point. Bills and Sabres owner now working with the developers. It all started because Buffalo Sabres owner Terry Pegula was worried about the neighborhood. Pegula's office at the nearby KeyBank Center looks out at Canalside, and for the past 2 years, that view included the hulking and stalled $45 million construction project at Heritage Point. As the project languished, held up by a lack of financing, Pegula saw an empty shell that was far from a neighborhood asset Heritage Point's developer promised it would become. And that was having an impact on Pegula as well. He already has extensive holdings along the waterfront and near the Heritage Point project, especially the parking ramp, skating rinks, and towering Marriott Hotel at the Lecom Harbor Center. Everyone's keenly aware of our holdings in the area, said Pete Gwelly, president of business operations for the Pegula-owned Sabres and Buffalo Bills. Terry and Kim spent a lot of time there. Terry's family office staff spends time in that area. It was pretty clear that it was an important location and the project had stalled, Gwelly said. It was an important project that if we're going to continue to see development of Canalside, that it needs to get finished. Developer Nick Sinatra had been working since 2018 to erect a pair of 6-story buildings with apartments and commercial space on the South Ord block as part of an effort to replicate the denser historic look of Buffalo's waterfront from the 19th century. It would include 2 brick buildings totaling 104,000 square feet with 57 1- and 2-bedroom apartments plus 25,000 square feet of ground floor office and retail space. But the project suffered one delay after another as costs soared for materials, labor and supply chain issues. An environmental cleanup began in March of 2022, but was also more challenging and more costly than expected. And after construction started in 2023, Sinatra's financing fell through when one of its lenders pulled out after its own funding source dried up, and another lender cut back on its commitment because of banking industry issues. So, Sinatra suspended the work in late 2023 and hasn't been able to restart, drawing criticism from everyone from city leaders to Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz and Governor Kathy Hochul. That was concerning to Pegula and his team, too. As time dragged on, they began to worry about the impact that the empty shell could have on the rest of Canalside and on their own businesses. And they couldn't help but wonder what kind of message that sends not only to Buffalonians, but especially to visitors coming downtown to the waterfront. That's a somewhat delicate ecosystem down there, and it has to work together, Gwelly said. We're doing everything we can to program the arena at a high level and bring as many events as possible. We want our properties to operate effectively as we can, but it doesn't work unless there's a vision for the entire arena or area. In particular, he noted, the National Hockey League draft is coming to Buffalo in June, bringing many people and significant national attention to the city and Canalside. Seeing the progress on an active construction site is far better than it sitting abandoned. It's reputational opportunities from across the country, and we want to see Buffalo at its best, and we think the Canalside area done right is an indication of that, Gwelly said. And that's why Pegula decided to intervene, directing his family office staff to investigate what was going on and why, and to contact Sinatra. That led to the start of conversations, quote, to see what we could do to assist, Gwelly explained. Eventually, Pegula and Sinatra worked out a deal to get the project back on track by helping the developer fill a substantial funding gap. Gwelly wouldn't discuss the details of Pegula's investment in the project or where others might be involved as well. It took almost a year to hammer out, but the deal finally closed Wednesday, ensuring that Sinatra can restart construction. There's a level of due diligence that has to occur, and they're complex transactions, and that's just the amount of time it took to get things finalized, Gwelly said. Gweldy said Pegula isn't so much monitoring the day-to-day progress of projects in Buffalo as maintaining a high-level awareness of what's being developed in and around the properties that we're currently invested in. He noted the purchase of the former Buffalo News building by Rochester businessman Tom Golisano for the new Golisano Institute of Business and Entrepreneurship, as well as the new DL&W Terminal Metro Rail Station and ongoing work at that facility.
Our next headline is State Hears Appeal on Who Can Hike the City's Debt. A state appeals court is weighing whether Buffalo's controller can refuse to borrow money approved by the mayor and common council for capital punishment projects, a dispute that has stalled tens of millions of dollars in spending on streets, pools, community centers, and schools. Lawyers for the Buffalo Common Council members Christopher Scanlon and Mitch Nowakowski, and for City Controller Barbara Miller-Williams, argued the case Thursday before a panel of state appellate judges. At issue is who ultimately controls city borrowing, the elected officials who approve the capital budget, or the elected controller who says the city cannot safely take on more debt than her office recommends. The lawsuit was filed by Scanlon, the former acting mayor and current South District Council member, and Fillmore District Council member Mitchell Nowakowski. They are seeking to force Miller-Williams to issue debt for the full amount approved in the city's last two capital budgets. Miller-Williams refused last year to borrow the full $110 million that was approved in December 24, citing a debt cap set by her office. After months of public pressure from Scanlon, she ultimately secured $29 million in borrowing. That figure is slightly above the cap in her annual borrowing plan, but far short of the full amount authorized by the council. That fight escalated in September when Scanlon and Nowakowski sued to force the controller to move forward with the borrowing. State Supreme Court Justice Emilio Colaiacovo later ruled in their favor. Miller-Williams appealed, arguing that yielding would set a damaging precedent and undermine what she says is her charter mandate duty to superintend the city's finances. In Thursday's arguments, William Savino of Woods Oviatt Gilman, representing the Comptroller's office, said the city charter gives Miller-Williams authority to protect Buffalo from taking on unmanageable debt. He also argued that Common Council resolutions in 1945 and 1994 delegated borrowing discretion to the controller. There is no doubt that for over 30 years, Buffalo's controller has held the power to determine if, when, and how to issue anticipation notes and serial bonds authorized by the Common Council, Savino told the court. Buffalo's Common Council delegated this power in its 1945 and 1994 resolutions, but retained the power to authorize the bonds and notes. Several judges pushed on that claim. Justice Tracy Bannister questioned whether the controller's authority extends beyond raising concerns about the wisdom of the spending once the mayor proposes it and the council approves it. I get that there could be a question, maybe thoughtfully questioning some of the expenditures, Bannister said. But once that's done and brought to the attention, it's still voted yes, and you must spend it. You must get these bonds. Does she have the last word? Savino said she does, unless the council formally revokes the authority he says it delegated decades ago. Because of the resolutions, yes, Savino said. If they don't like her having the discretion, they should get rid of the resolutions. Terrence Counters, outside counsel for Scanlon and Nowakowski, argued that the charter leaves borrowing decisions with the mayor and the council, and that the controller is wrongly using the old resolutions to claim a veto power that she does not have. The resolutions are the straws they're grasping onto to supplant the legislative power, the branch of government, to interfere with a separation of powers, Connor said. All sides are using outside counsel because the city's law department represents the mayor, council, and the controller's office. A spokesperson for Mayor Sean Ryan said the city has so far been billed more than $156,000 in legal fees related to the dispute. The appeals panel has not said when it will rule, but Ryan said this week he hopes for a decision next month so that his administration can begin to work on projects that are included in the last two capital budgets.
Well, Ted, our next story is no joke. The National Comedy Center in Jamestown has been voted the best pop culture museum.
Wow.
The National Comedy Center in Jamestown has been serving up laughs for close to a decade. Now, it's also racking up honors and awards. The center has been crowned the #1 best pop culture museum in the country by USA Today. That distinction is part of the 2026 USA Today 10 Best Reader's Choice Awards, which highlight outstanding travel destinations, attractions and experiences, lodging, shopping, food and drink, sports and outdoors, and more. America has long been a hotbed of pop culture, and these 10 museums celebrate the very best of it, according to USA Today. The Comedy Center, a museum and national archive dedicated to the art form of comedy, took the top spot following a 4-week national online voting period from January 12th through February 9th. It's far from the first national recognition it has received. It was on the U.S. News and World Report's list of 25 top family weekend getaways in the U.S. in August of 2023. It was named the best new museum in the country by USA Today in February of 2020. In the summer of 2019, it was one of Time magazine's World's Greatest Places and one of People magazine's 100 Reasons to Love America. And it's been featured in the New York Times, CBS Sunday Morning, and on NBC's Today, which called it the Smithsonian of Comedy. The award is a great acknowledgement of the national asset right here in Western New York that more and more people are discovering each day, said Journey Gunderson, Executive Director of the National Comedy Center. We know that what was built is compelling and entertaining visitors based on our views, but to have a national spotlight put on what we worked so hard to build here in Jamestown always feels validating, both in recognizing the quality of the museum and in validating the importance of the subject matter, that comedians and comedy matter, and that there should be a national archive and museum. And so we're proud to be the home of that, Gunderson said. The award is an affirmation of the center's mission to honor comedy as a living, breathing art form, said Gary Hahn, Vice President of Marketing and Communications at the National Comedy Center. 19 other institutions nationwide, including Rochester's Strong National Museum of Play, were nominated in the pop culture category by a panel of nationally recognized travel and lifestyle experts. The National Comedy Center features more than 50 interactive exhibits that explore comedy history, from early vaudeville to modern internet memes. The 37,000 square foot facility showcases influential artists, iconic works, and cultural moments that shaped the art form. The center also operates the Lucille Ball Desi Arnaz Museum, which explores the lives, careers, and legacy of Ball, who was born in nearby Celeron and Arnaz. And I'll tell you, Ted, I've been to the Comedy Museum, and I would highly recommend it to anybody to go. It's a good time down there.
Oh, it's absolutely. We have a family membership there, and every time we go, there's just something new and fun-loving to do. Lifts your spirits, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
It's wonderful. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 14 minutes after the hour. And now we turn to the sports section. And first of all, a red-hot Buffalo Sabres. And the headline is that the Sabres eye tweaks at the trade deadline. Welcome to trade deadline week. In Jarmo Kekalainen, all Sabres fans trust. But this is not the deadline week that the fans or Kekalainen envisioned when he took over in December. Instead of big moves needed, Kekalainen simply needs to make a few tweaks. When your team is a rumbling wagon at 24 wins, 5 losses, and 2 ties in the last 31 games, there's no need to fix what isn't broken. The Sabres might be interested in another forward, especially one who can offer an added look on the power play. But scoring is very decent, as the Sabres are 6th overall in the National Hockey League in goals scored. Pretty much everybody in the free world knows what the Sabres must get is help defensively. Get a right-hand shot for the third pair. Michael Kesselring has had an injury-plagued season and seemingly gets banged up twice a night these days. Zach Mensah has done yeoman work on the third pair, but he's small. He's only 5'9" and 198 pounds, and he's just playing as a rookie. Choices like Chicago's Connor Murphy, Winnipeg's Logan Stanley, or Calgary's Zach Whitecloud would seem to be the kind of players that can be beneficial to Kekalainen to acquire. While Mensah seems best suited to be the number 7 guy on the blue line, you have to give it up for him for the way he's rung up some absolutely incredible numbers. Mensah had his first career multi-point game on Saturday at Tampa Bay, with a goal and assist that added to these incredible totals in playing at 5-on-5. While he's on ice, the Sabres have outscored opponents 18-2, and they're on a bender whenever he's playing. Shooters are scoring at 19% of their shots, and Buffalo goalies have rung up an astounding 9.985 save percentage whenever he's on the ice. For now, at least, we won't get a window into Kekalainen's mind. Through a team spokesperson, the new general manager declined an interview request from the Buffalo News and other outlets last week, and indicated he had nothing to offer ahead of the deadline on his thought process or any update on Alex Tuch's potential contract expansion. Like all general managers, we'll hear from Kekalainen at some point on Friday after the 3 p.m. deadline passes. The Sabres could be much calmer this time. The players were on pins and needles last March, and it was an emotional departure from their hotel in Fort Lauderdale when Dylan Cousins and Dennis Gilbert departed for Ottawa in a deal for Josh Norris. It's possible somebody could be dealt off this roster, but only because Kekalainen is looking to improve the team's depth for the playoff run. Asking myself questions about the deadline. For about the forwards, does the fire sale erupt in St. Louis with big names such as Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, Braden Shen? Does Calgary what does it do with Nazem Kadri and Blake Coleman? What about Vancouver with Elias Peterson and Jake DeBrusk? It feels like Toronto is getting ready to deal Bobby McMahon. On defense, Justin Faulk of the Blues is a real prize at a cap hit of $6.5 million through next season and holding a 15-team no-trade list. Doesn't seem like the Sabres can get involved with him, and he might have them on his no-trade list anyway. Our old friend Rasmus Ristolainen of Philadelphia may be looking for a new home just as he gets past 800 career games. And in goaltending, does Florida deal Sergei Bobrovsky? And what does St. Louis do about Jordan Binnington? The Sabres aren't going to want to see either potential free agent land in Montreal, that's for sure. And in some playoff odds, this is most interesting. We've never heard this in the last 15 years, Ed. The Sabres are now 88.4% to make the playoffs on Sunday. The site has them at 36.9% to make the second round, 14.6% to make the East Final, and 2.6% to win the Stanley Cup. The favorite team right now is Tampa Bay at 12.8%. But that's incredible that somebody's saying a miracle may happen.
I don't want to say anything. I don't want to jinx them.
Don't want to jinx them.
Nope. Just leave it alone. Watch and enjoy. But
That's it.
I don't want to be the reason that the Sabres don't make the playoffs.
But at least there's a possibility.
Quiet.
Over to you, Ed.
Well, there's football news, and the headline here is the Bills hope to get up to speed on the top wide receivers. Of course, GM Bean is relying on other qualities while evaluating prospects, and this is Catherine Fitzgerald's column. This year's 40-yard dash king has emerged. Mississippi State wide receiver Brennan Thompson took the crown of the fastest 40 at the 2026 NFL Scouting Combine this week in Indianapolis. Thompson ran a 4.26-second 40 on Saturday, a time that tied with the fifth fastest combine 40-yard dash since 2003. And while there are plenty of ways that speed shows up on the field, the 40-yard dash is perhaps the most entertaining for fans following the combine closely, and it can be illustrative as well. Bills general manager and president of football operations Brandon Beane made it clear once again in Indianapolis that the Bills will look for speed as they evaluate wide receivers. A high school sprinter, Thompson was one of just 3 players in Indianapolis to run under 4.3 seconds heading into Sunday. The offensive line was set to be the last group to run the 40 on Sunday, so it's doubtful that any of them would break the mark. Thompson joined Ohio State safety Lorenzo Styles Jr. at 4.27 seconds and LSU wide receiver Xavion Thomas at 4.28 seconds as the only 3 to run under 4.3, keeping the combine record safe. The combine record is 4.21 seconds, set in 2024 by wide receiver Xavier Worthy. Worthy was selected by the Kansas City Chiefs in the first round with the 28th overall pick, one that was traded to them by the Bills. The Bills traded back twice. They ended up selecting wide receiver Keon Coleman at number 33, a pick that has yet to fully pan out for Buffalo. Coleman ran a 4.61 40-yard dash at the Combine. Worthy, meanwhile, said at last year's Super Bowl that he used the Bills trading out of drafting him as motivation throughout the season. Beane doesn't want just track and field speed, though, and while the Combine gives him a chance to see the speed translate into different drills, it's the interviews that really make an impact on his evaluating. There's some guys that are naturally quicker. Well, I hope to see that quickness in some of the drills, and some guys are straight line speed that they might struggle in a shuttle drill or whatnot, Beane said on Tuesday. But to me, I like the Combine to really understand their personality and what makes them tick. Rounding out the top 5 40-yard dash times after Thompson, Styles and Thomas were 2 more wide receivers, Deion Burks of Oklahoma, who ran a 4.30, and Jeff Caldwell of Cincinnati, who ran a 4.31. The top 10 included a cornerback, 2 more safeties, a running back, and another wide receiver, and this class of wide receivers has been noted for its collective speed, although none quite as fast as Worthy. A few top wide receiver prospects did not participate in the 40 this year for various reasons, including Mekhi Lemon, Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion, and Jordan Tyson.
In auto racing, NASCAR is seeing Riddick roll. Tyler Riddick's latest win drove him straight into the NASCAR record books. Riddick held off hard-charging Shane Van Gisbergen over the final 20 laps at the Circuit of the Americas on Sunday to become the first Cup Series driver to win the first 3 races of the season. driving a Toyota co-owned by Michael Jordan, Reddick won the season-opening Daytona 500 and a week later at Atlanta, then won from the pole in the first road course of the year. Jordan, the Basketball Hall of Famer and six-time NBA champion, was with Reddick, 23XI crew, exchanging high fives as Reddick crossed the finish line in Austin, Texas. "It's one race, but it was so important," Reddick said. "It's so fitting to get 3 in a row and to make history. History made for a team and ownership group that has been making a lot of it. They took on NASCAR with a federal antitrust lawsuit. The settlement in December was considered a major legal victory that secured a permanent franchise-style model and ensured the team would remain in business for the long term. They've been unbeatable on the racetrack ever since. I'm proud of the team we put together," Jordan said. He credited co-owner Denny Hamlin, who also is with a driver for Joe Gibbs Racing, and being the mastermind behind this racing success. And elsewhere, at Hendrick Motorsports, driver Alex Bowman had to get out of his car with about 20 laps to go after complaining about being sick. He was replaced by Myatt Snyder, who was working as a pit spotter for the Fox Broadcasting. Snyder had to scramble to put on his race suit and get in the car. In other news, it was a rough start for two-time IndyCar champion Will Power in his first race with a new team, and the same for Mick Schumacher in his series debut. Schumacher didn't even complete a lap Sunday in the season-opening IndyCar race on the downtown streets of St. Petersburg, where he could not escape a crash in the opening minutes when Stingray Robb and Santino Ferrucci collided.
Well, turning now to high school boys basketball, St. Joe's and Canisius eke out wins, and the teams are set to meet in their Manhattan Cup final today. In a league where the margin for error is thin, the St. Joe's boys basketball team proved Saturday its future is as bright as its present. Behind sophomore guards J.J. Shanklin and Gary Alexander, the Marauders withstood a fourth-quarter rally by Nichols to earn a 50-48 win in the Monsignor Martin's Manhattan Cup semifinals at Canisius University's Kessler Athletic Center. St. Joe's will have a return appearance there against Canisius High School in the final tonight at 8 o'clock. The atmosphere in that venue should motivate any athlete and is a testament to the Monsignor Martin Athletic Association. It was a great high school basketball game, St. Joe's coach Cooper Calzanetti said afterwards. I think it's a credit to our league. It shows that everyone in our league is so good. It was a tight contest over the first two quarters. The Marauders led 15-13 after the first and 27-24 at halftime. However, the third quarter belonged to St. Joe's, which increased its lead to 12 midway through the period, and entering the final quarter was up 41-30. Shanklin led the team high with 17 points on 7-15 shooting. He added 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 steals, and a block. Alexander tallied 15 points on 6 of 18 shooting. They're good, Calzanetti said of his young duo. They're not even scratching the surface of how good they can be. Sometimes they look like seniors and sometimes they look like sophomores. The big development piece for them this year is that those guys know when they make mistakes. Meanwhile, Canisius' Manhattan Cup semifinal game against St. Mary's was a grinding and foul-plagued victory good enough to survive and advance. Despite a double-digit lead evaporating because of St. Mary's zone defense, the Crusaders found their footing when the clock hit triple zeros in regulation. Led by Darnell Gilmore Jr., Jack Cullinan, Christian Gill, and Elijah Jones, the Crusaders did enough to secure a 47-44 overtime victory. Hey, playoff basketball, Canisius coach Kyle Husband said. We didn't play the cleanest game we've played. We had a big layoff, and we made enough plays to play on Monday night. And Canisius now turns its attention to St. Joe's, Knowing that it can't make the same mistakes against the Marauders, the last time the teams met, Cullinan hit the game winner at the buzzer.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 30 minutes after the hour. And now it's time for some advice from Ask Eric. This wealthy employer's chaotic schedule causes undue stress. Dear Eric, I'm 65 and have been retired for the past 2 years. To stay active, I went to work as a personal driver for a very wealthy man. I'm salt travels on average 1 day a week. I still get paid. It's really not about the money. I just enjoy the position. What I don't like is getting the schedule on Friday for my personal planning purposes. Often the schedule drastically changes, usually with little notice, sometimes the same day. I have had several conversations with him about being more transparent, so I may plan my time off. Several times I changed plans just to accommodate him. I asked him to please update the schedule as soon as possible as he makes plans. His response for me is to inform his assistant. I spoke to his assistant, who told me she updates the calendar immediately, and then it's added to my calendar, which may take a day or two. I asked him to send the updates directly to me, since I'm the one who's responsible for driving him. His response was, I don't know how to add to the driving calendar. I told him to text me the information and I'll add it to the calendar. He said he would, but he says a lot of stuff and never follows through. What can you add to assist in this issue? And it's signed, Driver Being Driven Nuts. And Eric replies, Dear driver, one option is to ask his assistant to give you access to the main calendar that updates immediately so you can make your plans more quickly. I'm not sure whether this is feasible. Perhaps he has things on there that he doesn't need you to see, but it can't hurt to ask her. Because he has a driver and an assistant, and probably other staff, it sounds like he wants to offload a lot of the logistics of his life. So asking him to do more communicating about something he purposefully doesn't want to be involved in may be a non-starter for him. If you can't get access to the main calendar, you may have to decide whether this is still a job that works for your life. It may be that you want more control over your own schedule, and this isn't a job that allows for that. It's fine to say, this was a great opportunity that you enjoyed for a time, but now you want your time back for yourself. Next letter. Dear Eric, my husband and I are in the same situation as Left at Home, who struggled with envy about her husband's work trips. My husband has a job he dislikes, but it's his own business, and he can't leave it until he retires. I travel occasionally for work. When I travel, I stay at nicer hotels, eat at nicer restaurants, and sometimes do interesting things. But I'd rather not travel for work anymore. To my husband, my traveling is exciting, and he feels envious. Left at Home said that her husband tells her he doesn't want to go on trips anymore, but then tells her about all the good food and fun things that were planned for them. She thinks he is disingenuous and feels like the trips and experiences are distancing her from him. I believe her husband. I don't like traveling anymore. I face long flight delays and cancellations, getting up at 3 a.m. to make a flight, spending nights alone in hotels, missing my husband and my family. Long drives in unfamiliar places, often late at night because my flight was delayed. Long, meaningless meetings. Yes, I come home and I tell them I had an interesting site visit or that I ate something wonderful at a unique restaurant. But I do that because I want to share my experiences with the person I love. I also share the bad experiences, but he thinks I'm being disingenuous. Believe me, I'm not. I'd rather not travel anymore. It isn't glamorous and exciting. I hope she gives him the benefit of the doubt and stops giving him a hard time. If he needs the job and the job comes with travel, then she should accept it gracefully and find other things to do, as you recommended. And it's signed, Weary Traveler. And Eric's response is, Dear Traveler, I really appreciate you sharing your perspective. The situation the couple in the letter find themselves in is a common human one. The grass always seems to be greener on the other side, but appearances aren't the full picture. Comparison is the thief of joy, and even otherwise happy marriages aren't immune to its burglary skills. But the old saying is true. We'd rarely trade our problems for someone else's. Better to look at what we do have and try to make something that we like out of it.
Well, Ted, maybe you've noticed that this winter has been particularly cold.
Really?
And our next story is headlined, Sticker Shock, Your Heating Bills May Leave You Speechless After an Arctic Blast. When Tracy Klossner opened up her utility bill this month, she walked over to her thermostat and turned the temperature down a few degrees. A resident of the Rochester, New York area, Klossner is no stranger to harsh winters, but a stretch of consecutive days of temperatures that hardly cracked the 20s and dipped to below zero was longer than Klossner, age 54, is used to. It shows up in her bill for the month ending on February 2nd, which clocked in at more than $720 for her 2,600 square foot single-family home. I was just utterly speechless, said Klossner, a purchasing manager for a small manufacturing company. As millions of Americans reel from what forecasters said was the coldest invasion of Arctic air of the winter season, now comes the sticker shock of utility bills after heat ran nearly nonstop to combat the freeze, though experts say the causes of those big bills are often more complex than just the cold weather. Multiple rounds of frigid air spread through much of the eastern half of the country in recent weeks. A fierce and deadly winter storm brought snow, ice, and cold the weekend of January 24th across the Midwest, Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast. Then, the weekend of February 7th, the coldest winter blast yet plunged temperatures in the Northeast to the single digits or below zero, with wind chills recorded as low as minus 30 degrees because of extreme gusts. The prolonged below-freezing temperatures prevented the snowpack from melting, which reflected sunlight and limited natural warming. That kept the air colder and the energy demand higher, AccuWeather reported. Furnaces and heat pumps have been running nearly non-stop to keep homes, apartments, and businesses warm amid this cold, bitter cold, AccuWeather Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Porter said. This relentless cold has compounded the affordability challenges that many people have been struggling with this winter. The average heating demand in regions that dealt with the cold blast was estimated at between 115 and 150% above normal, according to an analysis by AccuWeather. Heating costs can vary widely depending on the type of heating and location. Electricity is the most expensive heating source this winter. More than half of Americans are likely to see high heat costs because of the cold, Porter said. In New England, 30 to 40% of homes rely on home heating oil, which involves filling up a tank that can last a while. The sticker shock might not be as high for these homes because they would have filled up before the season began. Electricity bills during the roughly 25-day cold spell were expected to run hundreds of dollars above normal for some households, Porter said. America has not experienced a winter with this many dangerous impacts and costly disruptions since 2021, Porter said. Klossner uses a mix of electric and gas to heat her home, with a furnace that runs on electric and a water tank and stove that run on natural gas. Her $724.28 bill in February was for both, billed by the same utility company, and is about $100 more than her bill from the same time last year, and up more than $300 from her bill in 2023. Klossner usually keeps her thermostat set to 71 degrees, but after seeing her bill this month, she said she's trying out 68 degrees. There's nothing in my budget that accounts for a $750 electric bill, Klossner said, adding that she doesn't know how lower-income families will possibly afford bills like these.
I can tell you the last couple of months, I can agree with that article.
Well, my bill usually arrives right about now or in the next day or two. It might be in my mailbox right now.
Stop at a bank on the way home. Our next article has to do with dining, and it's Beyond the Takeout Box. Taiwan-born chef George Chen, whose family immigrated to Los Angeles in 1967, remembers vividly how classmates looked at his school lunch of braised pork and Chinese sauerkraut between two pieces of bread. "Oh, God, what are you eating? That's gross," Chen recalled during a recent busy lunch hour at his San Francisco restaurant and bar, China Live, on the edge of the nation's oldest Chinatown. Now, everybody wants the braised pork and Chinese sauerkraut. Hopefully, perception of Chinese food has now come a long way. The immigrant kid, who felt like he had to hide his food, built a reputation for serving Chinese fine dining in the Bay Area. At China Live, Chen is like a circus ringmaster, overseeing a dumpling-making station, a stone oven roasting Peking duck, a noodle station, and a dessert station churning sesame soft serve. With all of this, he hopes to one day revive his upstairs restaurant, 8 tables, where course-by-course dining ranged from $88 to $188. In addition, he and his wife, Cindy Wang Chen, are getting ready to launch a similar concept, Asia Live, in Santa Clara. The Chens aren't the only ones elevating Chinese cuisine. They're within walking distance of the equally established Empress by Boon, Master Jews, and the newer Four Kings. Upscale Chinese-American restaurants from San Francisco to New York City have sprung up in recent years, garnering buzz with their refined tasting menus that soar far beyond Chinese takeout food staples. But in an industry where diners rarely question high prices of French haute cuisine or Japanese omakase, Chinese restaurateurs often contend with resistance in getting customers to pay fine dining tabs. Still, these owners and chefs insist their food, labor, and cooking techniques are just as worthy. "Why shouldn't I?" says Chen about his prices. Just because we're in Chinatown? Or just because people's perception of Chinese food is that it's only good if it's cheap? It's just not true. Since husband and wife, Bohm and Lynette Yao, opened Ying Tao, named for Boulon's grandmother, in New York's Hell's Kitchen in 2023, they have been upfront about their mission: contemporary Chinese food as an elegant dining concept. Their Michelin-starred restaurant offers a $150 chef's tasting menu. We are trying to break this bias, this boundary of people who only think about Szechuan food, Cantonese food, and the takeout box, said Bolognao, who also said he has nothing but respect for casual Chinese takeout restaurants. After earning a master's degree in food studies at New York University, Yao said he wanted to build a bridge between traditional Chinese and the fine dining scene that New York people are familiar with. Emily Wayne, who was a James Beard Award semifinalist last year for her Japanese American fare at Brooklyn's Lingo, is helping Yao achieve his goal as Ying Tao's new executive chef. For Ying, a Chinese Canadian whose culinary education emphasized French cooking, the importance of representation, from who's in the kitchen to what's on the plate, has always stayed with her. Yuen said she wants to go back to who she is and explore that. I was really struck by Boulan's mission statement, and it just really struck a chord with me of wanting to elevate Chinese culture and Chinese food. She's eager to play around with typical recipes like the Cantonese custard egg tart, dan tat, with a savory makeover with caviar and quail eggs. Egg on egg on egg, Wen said. Chinese culture and food has had its up and downs when it comes to its reception in the West. More than 200 years ago, Europe highly desired Chinese silks, ceramics, and tea, said Krishnan Du Rey, the director of NYU's Food Studies PhD program. China's defeat by the British in the 19th century's Opium Wars led to a view of China as a poor country, Rey said. Racist myths that Chinese people and their cuisine were strange and dirty persisted when Chinese railroad laborers came to the U.S. and were segregated to enclaves. Even today, Asian American restaurants have been affected by tired stereotypes. Rey says the rise in an ethnic food prestige tends to correlate with its country of origin rising in economic power. In Michelin's New York City guides, which highlighted between 300 and 400 restaurants, Rey found the percentage of Chinese regional cuisine went from 3% to 7% of mentions between 2006 and 2024. I think it's wonderful that there are these restaurants now in Chinatown, said Luke Tsai, the food editor for the San Francisco Bay Area PBS station KQED. It's fine also if you don't think it's worth it. But at the same time, I'm really glad that these restaurants exist.
Well, I'll tell you, it makes me think of the Jimmy Buffett song Cheeseburger in Paradise. Would be more my speed, I think. Our next story is headlined Neighbors Continue War, and this has to do with conflict between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And the headline is Taliban government accused of providing safe haven for militants. Afghanistan thwarted an attempted airstrike on Bagram Air Force Base, the former U.S. military base in north of Kabul, authorities said on Sunday, while cross-border fighting between Pakistan and Afghanistan stretched into a fourth day. The fighting has been the most severe between the neighbors for years, with Pakistan declaring that it is open war with Afghanistan. The conflict has alarmed the international community, particularly as the area is one where other militant organizations, including Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group, still have a presence and have been trying to resurface. Pakistan accuses Afghanistan's Taliban government of harboring militant groups that stage attacks against it and also of allying with its arch-rival, India. Border clashes in October killed dozens of soldiers, civilians, and suspected militants until a Qatari-mediated ceasefire ended the intense fighting. But several rounds of peace talks in Turkey in November failed to produce a lasting agreement, and the two sides have occasionally traded fire since then. On Sunday, the police headquarters of Parwan province, where Bagram is located, said in a statement that several Pakistani military jets entered Afghan airspace and attempted to bomb Bagram Air Base at around 5 a.m. The statement said Afghan forces responded with anti-aircraft and missile defense systems and managed to thwart the attack. There was no immediate response from Pakistan's military or government regarding Kabul's claim of attempted airstrikes on Bagram or on the ongoing fighting, Bagram was the United States' largest military base in Afghanistan. It was taken over by the Taliban as they swept across the country and took control in the wake of the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from the country in 2021. Last year, U.S. President Donald Trump suggested he wanted to reestablish a U.S. presence at the base.
This next article is about this time of year, the Lenten season. The headline is simply, Penitent Mercies. The Lenten period for penance started with Ash Wednesday, and some Catholic priests happily braced for long lines outside confessionals across the United States. In recent years, the sacrament shifted from embarrassing recitation of sin to cathartic quest for grace. They come to confession feeling as if they are terrible, but they are displaying the fact that they want to be good, the Reverend Patrick Gilger, a Jesuit priest in Chicago, said of the faithful. The fact that somebody shows up to confession is a lived act that they desire holiness. For Catholics, the sacrament of penance and reconciliation is supposed to be a regular weekly or monthly practice. Penitents tell the priest their sin, pledge not to commit that again, receive forgiveness, and go on their way with the penance, able to receive communion again. It's something they do, which their Protestant and other non-Catholic neighbors don't do, said James O'Toole, a Boston College professor emeritus and author of A New History of Confession. Until the last decades of the 20th century, confession was often a recitation of how and how often one sinned, followed by an act of contrition and a penance like saying 10 Hail Marys. Parishes and schools had a list of sins by grievousness, from mortal ones like adultery to venial offenses like talking in church. Then came a steep decline in confession, O'Toole said. It was driven by clergy abuse scandals, the growth of psychology, and major cultural changes. The Catholic Church does not gather data on confession, so it's hard to quantify trends, according to the Reverend Thomas Gaunt, who leads Georgetown University's Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate. However, U.S. parishes noticed an uptick, and priests say that while acknowledging sins and receiving absolution remain core, confession turned more into a conversation focused on God's mercy and love. There's only so many ways to go wrong. There's an infinite number of ways to be right and to have God's life coursing through you, said the Reverend Mike Nugent, a parochial victor at St. Ambrose Catholic Church in Annandale, Virginia. It's not that confessions today are getting out of hell free cards. Priests cannot give absolution or God's forgiveness if the penitent isn't willing to change. But they try to extend the same mercy that Jesus showered on sinners in the Gospels. What sinfulness is in the Catholic Church's theological understanding is the intentional, willful distancing of oneself from God, said Gilger, who also teaches at Loyola University in Chicago. The point of confessing your sins, of attending to sin, is only to allow the God who wants to be with us to rush back into the emptiness that those sins have created. That's why several priests talk about confession as therapeutic, both for the penitent and the confessor, especially in a society that's keener to judge than to forgive. The seal of the confessional is so absolute, the Vatican fought legislative efforts to compel certain disclosures. When they kneel in front of a screen in a confessional or sit face to face with a confessor, most people want to offload an unburdened and hear encouragement, the priests say. It's about healing. You must trust You need openness, you need vulnerability, and you need honesty. Knowing that I'm loved, even with my struggles, even with sin, even with the things that are challenging and shameful in my life, and I am still loved perfectly, my gosh, that's good news. Priests can bring relief in dramatically urgent confessions from those who are dying or who admit to a major fault, such as cheating or stealing. Other times, priests might need to nudge a vague penitent who only mumbles, "I haven't been true to myself, and it's hard for me to accept something broadly accepted like contraception that the church considers sinful."
Well, you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, March 2nd. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ted Pajacki
and Ed Howard, and we thank you for listening.
Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability.